Lewis Hamilton's highly anticipated Ferrari debut at the Australian Grand Prix was more of a fizzle than a fireworks display. The seven-time world champion, now 40, wrapped up his first weekend in red with a lacklustre 10th-place finish, despite leading the race in Melbourne. And according to Peter Windsor, it's all his fault. Let's hear what he has to say about Ferrari's newest driver today. Starting from 8th on the grid, Lewis Hamilton found himself slipping backward as the race went on, ultimately crossing the line behind his new teammate Charles Leclerc and trailing his former Mercedes ally George Russell by a staggering 7 positions. Meanwhile, Russell celebrated on the podium alongside race winner Lando Norris and defending champ Max Verstappen, leaving Hamilton's Ferrari debut looking less like a fairy tale and more like a frustrating false start. Lewis Hamilton's Ferrari adventure is off to a rocky start, and while he may have expected some growing pains, a pointless debut wasn't exactly part of the script. After his blockbuster move from Mercedes, the 7-time champ would have been hoping for a stronger opening chapter, but both he and teammate Charles Leclerc found themselves miles off the pace of McLaren and Red Bull in Melbourne. Former Williams boss Peter Windsor took issue with how Hamilton faded from contention and his stubborn approach over team radio. As the race slipped away in the closing laps, Hamilton stuck to his guns, repeatedly telling race engineer Riccardo Adami to leave it to me instead of following pit wall instructions, though in the end there wasn't much left for him to take control of. Reflecting on the moment on his YouTube channel, Windsor said, "There were a lot of weird radio transmissions going on with Ferrari, almost becoming uncomfortable with Charles Leclerc, giving his engineer a hard time. And they were giving Lewis a lot of instructions on how to get past Alex Albon, to do with the DRS and various switches. He kept saying, 'I can handle it, I can handle it.' Well, Lewis, you didn't handle it and you never got past Alex Albon. For a Ferrari driver, admittedly in his first Grand Prix with the team, to be outraced by Alex Albon in the Williams is a bit embarrassing, to be honest. I was a bit surprised that Lewis was taking a rather dogmatic approach on the radio, because I'm sure on the pit wall they were thinking, what's going on here? Why can't he get past him?" Both Leclerc and Hamilton might have salvaged a better result in Melbourne, if only Ferrari had been quicker on the draw when the rain came pouring down. Instead, the Scuderia hesitated, keeping their drivers out on slicks for just a bit too long, turning what could have been a strategic masterstroke into a costly misstep. As a result, both Hamilton and Leclerc lost precious ground while skidding around on the wrong tyres. After the race, Leclerc couldn't help but question the team's decision-making, saying, "It was a tough race and there are things we have to review and work on. We weren't the fastest out there, but in such weather conditions, there was a chance of scoring some big points which we didn't capitalise on today. There are 2 things we have to look into. The first is easy, it was my mistake. The second is something we will sort out as a team, looking into our decisions and making sure we make the right call if the situation comes up again." 9-time podium finisher turned pundit Martin Brundle called Hamilton's Ferrari debut disappointing by any metric. He does not think Hamilton did anywhere near enough to satisfy on his big Ferrari debut. Despite lots of happy words and reasons why he had to learn his steering wheel and other new aspects, Lewis Hamilton had a disappointing start to his Ferrari career by any metric, Brundle stated in his Sky Sports column. 8th on the grid behind his teammate Leclerc, losing out a little in the first corner and following Alex Albon's Williams for what seemed like an age, and then being passed around the outside of the fast turn 9 by a spectacularly recovering Oscar Piastri on the final lap, consigning Lewis to 1 point in 10th place, was not where he should be. Brundle didn't just critique Hamilton's on-track struggles, he also raised an eyebrow at what he called an angsty attitude toward new race engineer Riccardo Adami. "I don't understand why Lewis was so angsty with his engineer Riccardo Adami," Brundle continued, "who I felt was simply trying to pass over relevant and helpful information. A late downpour at Albert Park threw a curveball into the race, creating a golden opportunity for bold strategy calls. But Ferrari's gamble to stay out on slicks backfired spectacularly. It all really fell apart for Ferrari when they rolled the dice on dry tyres on a wet track and lost out heavily on track position for both drivers. And they left Australia 7th in the championship. Yet despite the harsh criticism, the 7-time champ remained optimistic, insisting there's still untapped performance in the SF-25. Hamilton was quick to defend their working relationship, praising Adami's efforts and emphasising that they're still learning about each other bit by bit. Hamilton has been crystal clear. He's here to fight for the title after 3 tough years at Mercedes. But even a 7-time champ knows that settling into a new team and mastering a new car takes time. Speaking after the race, Team boss Fred Vasseur emphasized that Ferrari must learn from their mistakes and make serious strides before the Chinese Grand Prix if they want to get back in the fight. It was the first race, the first time that we have to communicate between the pit wall and the car. We can do a better job and know each other more, Vasseur said. For sure, it was not a clean one at all. The strategy was difficult, and we need to find a better way to communicate between the car and the pit wall. But we will learn from race 1, and it is not an issue. It was not a shock, but for sure it was not a good weekend for us. But we focus on next week, the Chinese Grand Prix, and learn a lot from this weekend because we made mistakes. We need to improve the communication, understand what Lewis needs from the communication, and it is only in this situation that we can be in the situation. We will be much better next week. As Hamilton and Ferrari continue refining their approach to unlock the SF-25's full potential, the 7-time champion remains confident that better days are ahead. Determined to squeeze more pace out of his new machine, Hamilton believes a smarter strategy and improved execution could make all the difference. Reflecting on a rain-soaked and frustrating Australian Grand Prix, he said, "I'm grateful I got through it, and I came out of it with a little bit of stuff, at least it's 1 point. Obviously didn't go off or spin today, but lacking pace for sure. But I do believe the car has more performance than we were able to extract this weekend. It was even less performance than, for example, in the race, but I think it's all settings." The entire race weekend had been bone dry, until Sunday's downpour threw a wrench in Hamilton's progress. The sudden change in conditions, he explained, effectively hit the reset button on his efforts to gradually build up speed in the SF-25. Reflecting on his dry weather performance in Melbourne, Hamilton said, "I think just for me it was just confidence. It's like just building confidence. From the moment I got in the car on Friday, I didn't have the confidence, particularly in all the high speed. I was down a huge amount. Then into Saturday, confidence was coming back, was building. And then we got to the race, and again starting from scratch, and I didn't have any confidence through pretty much most of the race. But I think in the settings as well, the car was very tricky." After mentioning the SF-25's settings as a key factor in his performance, Hamilton was asked the big question. If he could hit the reset button and redo his Ferrari debut, what would he change? With the benefit of hindsight, the 7-time champ had plenty to consider as he reflected on what could have been in Melbourne. Many things, he responded. "I think setup-wise, would set the car up just a lot different and position the car different in different parts of the race, different calls." One of Ferrari's boldest strategic calls in Melbourne was their decision to keep Hamilton and Leclerc out when the late race downpour hit. For a brief moment, it seemed like a masterstroke. The duo climbed up the order as rivals pitted. But as the rain intensified, chaos struck. Liam Lawson and Gabriel Bortoleto crashed, triggering a safety car, and by the time Ferrari finally called their drivers in, any hopes of a podium had vanished. Instead of fighting for trophies, Hamilton and Leclerc found themselves scrapping just to stay in the top 10. "In the last sector, everyone was going off, but I was managing to hold it on," said Hamilton. "So I was just passing people, and once we got past the start line, it was dry. So I was like, this is fine for me. I can hold this out. Only got a few more laps to go. But then it pelted down just in, I think, the last 2 laps. Started coming down. That's the moment we should have probably come in. Can Ferrari get it together at the Chinese Grand Prix? Or is this as good as it gets for them?" Share your thoughts in the comments section down below. And as always, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. Thanks for watching.